All right, we're looking at Prep Test 67, game number 4, and this is an unusual one. In this game, we're given 3 zones, and then we're given 3 types of subzones. Our subzones are H, I, and R. Our zones are just basically 1, 2, and 3. In the instructions, or in the original part of the game, they do tell us that no more than 3 of each type of subzone can be placed into the zones. So another way of writing that out is we could say that our variables are H, 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 I, R, R, R. Thus, we're going to be placing up to 9 spaces in our 3 zones, but it does not say that we have to place all 9 of them. So this is a very floating grouping game, but it is still just a grouping game. So let's look at our rules. Rule number 1 tells us that you cannot have an R subzone in zone 1. Easy. The second rule tells us no more than 2 H subzones are allowed in any given zone. So in other words, you can never see 3 H subzones in the same bigger zone. Next rule tells us no more than 1 R subzone is allowed anywhere there's an H subzone. So if there's an H subzone, you cannot have 2 R subzones. Okay. And lastly, I subzones are not allowed anywhere where there's an H subzone or 3 R subzones. So if you have an I subzone, you cannot have H, and you cannot have 3R. And I just sort of wrote that in a weird backwards way. A simpler way to have written that, which would just be the contrapositive, is if you have H or if you have 3 retail, you cannot have industrial. So there we've already taken care of one of our inferences, the contrapositive. Another one of our inferences here would, working with this rule right here, would say if you have 2 R's, you cannot have H. There's a couple of our inferences. So a very strange game right off the bat. It's definitely an unusual type here. But as we jump into the questions, we'll see how answering the question sheds a little bit more light on the scenario.